Hey there, Scott here from Social Energy Presents, and thanks for joining us. We've got a very exciting episode for you to enjoy today, featuring the incomparable Rodney Crowell, an internationally acclaimed songwriter, author, and deeply respected icon among music giants. Rodney is a multi-Grammy award-winning artist with 15 number one hits under his belt. Over the course of his career, Rodney has gracefully blended his own mainstream success as an artist with songs cut by the likes of Emmylou Harris, Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Keith Urban, and many more, making him a master among his peers. He's also penned many beloved songs for artists as diverse as Bob Seger, Etta James, The Grateful Dead, John Denver, Jimmy Buffett, and countless others. Among his many awards, Rodney was honored with the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers with their prestigious Founders Award in 2017. And today, Rodney joins us from his home in Nashville for a very intimate look back at his successes and to bring us up to speed in what he's been working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready as Social Energy now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
So I want to get into your writing only because I remember talking to Joe Robinson about it, and we were talking about the one thing he learned from you was hard, like what he called hard rhymes. You know, like making a rhyme. Like I remember Sammy Cahn was big that way back in the old days. You know, the brill building type of stuff where his lyrics had to be perfect. It wasn't like you'd have, doubt and you'd have moon and then trying to make word for word to rhyme with moon as opposed to actually using
moon and groom.
Yeah, groom. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
groom. Groom is not a hard rhyme.
No,
with moon,
right? And that's what Joe said. He said you really got on him to really learn how to do. Like to really work hard at getting the proper rhymes because it just makes it a better product in the end.
It does. And it sounds better to the subconscious of any listener. The soft rhymes don't play well in the subconscious, but a really good rhyme, a really good solid rhyme, and you have to work for them. I spend a lot of time trying to bend the language to the place where that rhyme comes up and it just has that pristine snap when you hear it. Yeah. And I teach songwriting. I have these songwriting workshops, and students come in, or they're not students, they're participants really, and I start with, okay, if you send me some soft rhymes, I'm going to spit it back out at you, And it's like, so you see their eyes they start scratching their heads, like, what's he talking about? And then, I make them bring printed lyrics, and then I could point. I said, why would you settle for this when it's not a rhyme? You can't fool Mother Nature.
I read something where you had started working with somebody, I don't know if it was Towns or if it was, but somebody where you were doing a song and they said, don't sing it to me. Say it to me like a poem, like say it to my eyes. Like,
well, yeah,
because that's when the words are as honest as they can be because they're not hidden behind a melody.
Well, that was Guy Clark.
Guy Clark. Okay.
So, and early in my, in the early experience that I was having as a songwriter, Guy was very generous with his time with me, and I would go around to his place with new songs I'd written. I'd play them for him. He'd listen to them. And then he'd say, okay, now look me in the eye and recite what you just sang. And the real test there was that we look into, his eyes as intense as his and come to that soft rhyme or that throwaway, couplet or something that really doesn't serve the songs. You want to avert your eyes. You can't deliver the truth. We can't deliver the truth with soft rhymes and with couplets that don't serve the song.
or just a basic lazy lyric.
Lazy lyric.
Yeah.
I've never tied those two words together, but that's good. A lazy lyric.
I'll take credit on the next song.
You can. I'll gladly give it.
I was going to say, getting back to that. So, are you a guy that writes every day, or do you write when you're inspired? I know you're not a mechanical writer. I know you don't write for a project. You write from your heart. But is it something you do every day? Like that's your work. You wake up in the morning and you write songs.
Yes.
And so, how many songs do you feel? Well, that's hard to say. That's a dumb question. I was going to say, how many songs do you feel you write in a week? But that's not fair. I mean, you probably throw away 1,000 more songs in a month than most people ever write.
No, not so. If I'm not on the road, if I'm not touring, you can bet in the morning I'm here in my studio, which is where I am now, and I'm working, I'm writing. And, it's like I've spent 30 years on songs, and I've, there's one of my most successful songs is Shame on the Moon that Bob Seger recorded.
Right. That's where I first heard about you, actually.
He made a big hit out of it. I've only recently become satisfied with the last verse. I never liked the last verse. I asked him, I said, man, how'd you sing that last verse? And he said, that's a great last verse. And I said, not for me. And I was never satisfied with that last verse.
What bothered you?
It was poor writing. It was lazy writing.
Lazy lyric.
It was lazy lyric. Thank you. It was. And that song was the last time I ever wrote with a television on, because I was strumming that 1 to 6 minor chord and I hit on that B flat change with a ooh, shame on the moon. I said, oh, I got something here. But the television was on, and right in the middle of, getting that chorus to work the way I did and was ready for the third verse, the Jimmy Jones report from Ghana flashed on the television and broke my concentration. And I didn't get the last verse in that first creative burst. And but I couldn't turn away from the Jimmy Jones debacle down there. Right. So that's the last time I've ever been anywhere near a television when I'm writing. And I cobbled together a last verse, and recorded it myself. And Bob then got it, and I always thought that last verse fell short of the mark, and quite a few people recorded it, and one songwriter in particular recorded it, whose name I will leave out of it because he's no longer living. He said, God, Rodney, I wish I'd have been around to help you with that last verse. And I said, man, I threw my arms around him. I said, man, finally somebody who agrees with me. The last verse doesn't work.
So he recognized that it wasn't your full potential.
He sure did. And wow. He's the only one. And so that was 1979 is when I wrote it, the beginning of it. And it was 2019 when I finally got a last verse that I like. So what's that, 40 years?
Yeah.
40 years to get that last verse.
So you've redone it with the last verse now?
I've been I retired this song after Bob Seger did it, for two reasons. The main reason was that he sang it so well. And I mean, he made it iconic, and his performance of it was beautiful. It's a great chorus on that song. And it's a combination of a great chorus and a great singer that made it the hit that it was. But once I got that last verse, I brought it back into my live performance show the end of last summer.
Okay.
It was the first time I had performed it live in 35, 40 years.
Wow. And what band were you with when you first wrote it?
Oh, that was right after probably my first album. So I don't know if the Cherry Bombs were. Yeah, I had a band at the time called the Cherry Bombs.
That's the one with Vince Gill, yeah.
Vince Gill and Larry London and Emery Gordy and Hank DeVito.
That must have been a great band.
Oh, it was a great band for sure.
I mean,
those were the days, you know, when Warner Brothers had, artist development department where they, I made a couple of records. They say, look, we're not worried about putting out a single. We'll give you some money to put a band together. You go out on the road and play, and let's see who your audience is.
Right.
That's a luxury that artists don't have anymore.
I know. It's so sad the way it works now. It's all so mechanical. There's a great songwriter up in Canada. He has a band called Chilliwack. His name is Bill Henderson, and there was an interview with him and back a few years ago. And they said, well, what do you think is one of the greatest things about the music business that's developed in the past while? And he said, well, the very fact that you can record an album in your bedroom from beginning to end is amazing. They said, well, what's the worst thing that's happened to the music business? He said, well, the very fact that you can record an album from beginning to end in your bedroom, because it's true. There used to be a nurturing that happened that doesn't happen anymore. And everybody, you talk to every Joe down the street, hey, I've got an album out. Well, yeah, but what is it? 6,000 albums a day are loaded up to Spotify or something like that. I mean, where do you rise above the muck,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's, and those days are gone. I consider myself lucky that I came along when I did, because that the mindset that goes with that kind of support and nurturing, good word, nurturing, is I'm still thriving today because of it. Is because, Warner Brothers didn't have to turn my art into, a windfall overnight. They were willing to take time with it.
They were willing to ride it.
Sadly for them, it wasn't until I moved over to Columbia Records that, I paid off. But my gratitude for Warner Brothers at that time is, intact to this day. I'm grateful.
Right. And so when you went to Columbia, was that after you were with the Hot Band?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Well, I wanted to get back into the roots of your life, but there's so many questions I want to ask you about songwriting. For one thing, you're just such a craftsman. The very fact that, I mean, like, where do you pull your inspiration from? Typical question, but sometimes there's situations where, let's say I'm driving in a car, and I don't know if they call it like a beta state or whatever, when you're driving and you're just driving, and sometimes the radio will be playing and an entire other melody and lyric will come into my mind because I'm actually not thinking about it. It's like my mind is relaxing. Does that ever happen to you as well?
Sure, of course.
Like when there's so much noise going on, and yet out of all this noise, distractions, you're driving, the radio's on, people are talking, and you can hear this thing rising out, like, rising out of the ashes of, like a phoenix, And I'm just trying to figure out how that works and why it works,
Well, the subconscious is a great tool, for songwriting, and to access inspiration too. And, to really drop down into that subconscious mode, or to have access to that part of your creativity, you really do have to be relaxed in some way. And driving is a really great way to compose. I like to drive and compose in my head and try to remember without writing down what I'm composing in my head, so that the next time I get near my iPhone to record it or to write it down, that it's already the rhymes are already solid, and if the melody is good enough, I'll remember it.
Yeah. Interesting. I remember something Paul McCartney just said recently. He said they didn't plan to write memorable songs. The fact is they had no tape recorders. So the songs had to be good enough that they would remember them themselves.
Yeah, I know.
Which is, and it's true. The simplicity of it now we rely on, like you just said, the iPhone. I mean, if I'll have an idea, put it on my iPhone or throw a microphone up in my studio quickly and run it by, and I'll come back 2 days later. I don't know what I've written, which is shameful. It's like,
it is a good tool though, that if you have a decent melody and you have recorded it and you can get back to it and learn it for what it was, then it becomes useful. But that thing of just playing the guitar, making some chord changes and singing loud until you remember it and that's your song. That's the way, She Loves You, yeah, 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 sounded like, it's just, we made up a song.
Yeah.
And Hank Williams was like, his music to me was like that. It was so immediate,
Yeah.
Today I passed you on the street and my heart fell at your feet. Well, you didn't spend a lot of time conjuring up that image. You just started singing it. Might have spent a lot of time writing that last verse.
Right.
But, here's what I say about it. When I was a young man in my 20s, sometimes I was capable of catching lightning in a bottle. And in my 20s, inspiration would come in big doses. And one of the challenges that I faced was getting it all in that first burst. And sometimes I was successful. I got Ain't Living Long Like This kind of all in the first burst of creativity. But there are other songs, Till I Gain Control Again was like that. But other songs, I had to learn how to make that last verse as good and as solid and as free as the first verse and chorus that came just out of the blue, the gift from out of the blue, to cobble together a last verse that stands alongside the gift from out of the blue, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. So do you ever take a break from writing? And if you do, is it hard to get your chops back? Because there is a rhythm that you have when you're writing. Because I mean, even like I'm a real fledgling writer, but like I noticed that when I am writing, I get better ideas. Like, let's say I'm working on a project where I need to write a number of songs. I find they connect the dots with themselves. Like because my brain is already in that mode, ideas come better and quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that the same thing with you? Do you find when you take a break, did you come back like with that lightning in the bottle attitude, or does it take you a while to get it back?
Lightning in the bottle, at the age I am now, the years that I've been doing it, I don't get my inspiration from lightning in a bottle now. I get my inspiration from dedication to the work.
Right.
So I don't take a break from writing. What I do is sometimes I go on the road, touring for extended periods of time, which most of the time I'm not writing then. But one thing I trust about it is that night after night, I'm singing 20, 25 songs. So I am using that part of my subconscious mind and my creativity to play these songs that I've written for people. And so when I come in off the road and I get back here in my studio and get back to work writing, I've been writing the whole time.
Right.
So I never take a break from writing, and I do not acknowledge writer's block. I don't give it.
Explain that.
I don't give it any power. I just simply do not acknowledge that there is for me a such thing as writer's block. What's happening is the reservoir is filling up and organizing itself so that I can access what needs to happen, and I carry on. I don't have writer's block, even if I'm not writing.
It's amazing you say that, because there's something that about convincing yourself of something, and I can relate it to this. I remember back playing cover music years back and having a terrible time remembering lyrics to songs. He said, I just don't believe that it's hard to memorize songs. And it made it easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, because I was beating myself up all the time. Like, why can't I memorize this? Why can't I memorize this? And I'd have lyric sheets on the floor for weeks sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And he just said, I decided that it's easy to memorize songs. And as soon as I did that, I could memorize them right away. And I went, never thought about that. So I did that. And I wouldn't take a lyric sheet up. And of course, the very first night, I'd blow a couple of lines, but I never blew them again. I go back and consult the lyric sheet after. But I think I'm sort of relating it to the writer's block thing, is that if you convince yourself there is no writer's block, it might go away on its own.
Yeah, well, yes, or quite possibly it just doesn't exist. I don't know that I've never. Here's an example. As I said, I've spent 18 years writing songs. I've spent 30 years writing songs. And in the time that I spent trying to uncover that last verse, if it took 30 years, it was just because I hadn't found it. It wasn't because I was blocked. I just hadn't found it yet. So I kept coming back. And my favorite, people ask me, what is your most important song? And I said, the song that I haven't finished yet, because that's the song that brings me back to work every day. You know, it's like I'm working on a song right now. I've been working on it for 2 months, actually writing a lyric to someone's melody, as you know, to help them out. At least 2 months I've been working on this one chorus. And I won't stop until I get it. And, you know, it's like you could throw a wrench in your works and say, well, I just can't get it. I got writer's block. No, I just haven't found it yet.
Right. Well, I remember hearing a story about Paul Simon writing Sounds of Silence, which is still a wonderful lyric to this day. You know, it's
yeah, it's one of the finest bits of writing ever.
Yeah, and apparently he took months to write almost each line because he knew how important it was going to be. It was like he just felt how important that song was going to be in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him months and months to write that song. He really, really concentrated on it. But then another song like Homeward Bound came like that, you know?
Yeah, so, that it happens both ways.
Yeah, exactly. So, so getting back, okay, so there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I'm just afraid I'm going to dwell on one thing, but I want to get back to your childhood. Now, when you grew up, so you had a musical family. You had a musical family. Your dad sang,
mm-hmm.
And was it your uncle that played banjo or something like that?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather, and the very first instrument was you playing drums. And if I recall, your father got you a set of drums, and within a week you were playing in a band with him. Mainly because they said he didn't want to pay for musicians. He figured he could get you for free.
That's very true. Yeah. My dad was probably a better singer than me, but my dad didn't have, but he wasn't a writer. My mother was more of a writer than my dad. My mother played with words, but my father had a savant memory of songs. He could hear a Roy Acuff song once or twice and have it. So he had a deep his repertoire was deep, from Appalachian Dead Baby to wartime hit country songs to 50s Hank Williams. So I grew up around that. And, he wanted to be a Grand Ole Opry star. My father did. But, he grew up during the Depression on a sharecrop farm, and he didn't know how to put it all together. But he did have bands. And he's, scraped by playing in honky tonks and what have you. And he had a drummer who was blind that couldn't grow too much with him. So he came home with a really cheap set of pawn shop drums on a Tuesday, and kind of showed me the rudiments of a shuffle. Got a kitchen chair and some phone books and said, here's what you do, watch my foot. And Friday night I was playing in a honky tonk.
How old were you?
I was 11.
11.
But the thing of it is, we should not even entertain the notion that I played well, because I didn't. It was a train wreck. But and my dad had a couple of musicians who were embarrassed at what was happening, but he just plowed through. He just, maybe I inherited that a thing about writer's block. It's like, well, my kid's back there playing drums and he can't play drums, but I don't care. I'm going to plow through. I'm going to do Setting the Woods on Fire right now. Here it goes. You don't like it, lump it.
So now, when did you start playing guitar?
As soon as I heard the Beatles.
So how old were you then?
Oh, 13.
13. And so
yeah.
Now, do you think your dad, because your dad had so many different, let's say, tools in his toolbox musically, helped you with your writing? And because you write in lots of different genres, you're not just an Americana or a country artist. You do a lot of different things.
Sure.
And do you think maybe it stems from that? You've had an appreciation for everything?
Well, I've made that part of my education, in my adult life, to really familiarize myself with a broad spectrum of music, from jazz to classical to the blues. In recent years, I've been really trying to discover my own inner blues man, and we'll see how that's going. But in terms of I think the biggest blessing that my father gave me, I'll tell you this: when I arrived in Nashville with my pal Donovan, we were a duo, and we realized that we didn't have the recording deal that we thought we were going to have. I kind of stumbled into a scene that Guy Clark was kind of the curator of, and Townes Van Zandt was around, and Mickey Newberry, and Dave Loggins, and Steve Earle came around, and Skinny Dennis, and all these guys. I didn't have any good songs that I had written, but because of my father, I knew some really obscure Appalachian Dead Baby songs, and I knew songs like You Gotta Have a License, and kind of folk country songs from the Depression era. And Guy appreciated the fact that I had a knowledge of that kind of songwriting and those kind of songs, to where I think it made him more inclined to give me his attention, because I had a knowledge of something that was worthwhile while I was learning to write my own songs. And that came from my dad and my grandfather. Those rabbit songs like Rabbit in the Graveyard and May I Sleep in Your Barn Tonight, Mister, and You Gotta Have a License, and all of these obscure bits of clever writing. I was blessed with that.
Now, I heard a story that, because you mentioned Townes Van Zandt and of course, and Guy and all that stuff, but how you ended up with that was through Jerry Reed, and it was really an odd way that Jerry Reed saw you. You were apparently, okay, I don't know if I'm right in this story, but I'm going to try my best. You were playing in a lounge, and the owner of the lounge said, "You don't play original material or I'm going to fire you. I only want to hear cover music."
That's true.
So basically you were playing this cover music, and then there was some sort of a falling out where you got upset and you played one of your songs, and sure enough, you got fired. But who was in the audience was Jerry Reed, and he heard your song and loved your writing.
Yeah, you're close on the story.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I had a girlfriend.
Okay.
And Townes seduced her. And I found out from Susanna Clark that this had happened. So in anger and angst, I wrote a song called "You Can't Keep Me Here in Tennessee." And I had a gig at in an afternoon happy hour where I was forbidden to play original songs, but I was angry and frustrated. And at the end of my set, I just said, "Here's a song I just wrote in defiance," and I sang it. Well, my boss came down one aisle and fired me, and Jerry Reed's manager came down the other aisle. There were 2 aisles to get to that little stage, and overheard him firing me. And he said, "Oh, good. Well, we want to record that song tomorrow, and we want to offer him a job as a songwriter.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make that up.
Holy smokes.
That happened. I got fired and hired in a matter of 5 seconds.
Well, thank God for bad luck, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And if it wasn't for Townes Van Zandt.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm grateful. Don't think I'm not grateful.
Yeah, that went a long way.
Yeah. And later on, I said, hey, man, to Townes, I said, thanks for that. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gotten the gig.
That's amazing.
and then the next day, I mean, literally the very next day, I went down to RCA studio. And of course, being young and nervous about it all, I got there early, and I walked into Studio A, and Chet Atkins was sitting at the console.
Wow.
He was there by himself. And so I'm tiptoeing in going, oh my God, this Chet Atkins. What do I do? What do I say? And he just looked at me and he said, did you write this song we're going to record today? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, come over here. Let me show you how we're going to do this. And man, it would have been a great time, for a cell phone or something, so I could have called everybody I knew and tell them what's happening. But that's the way it started, I've been lucky.
Wow. And so did you like his production
Of
your song?
I had not formed any opinions about production at that time.
Right. I guess, yeah, you were just sort of thinking of it as guitar and voice. So when
Yeah.
somebody adds to it, it's like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, there's my song, it's like
Right.
Jerry Reed singing my song. And it was a style of production that I would not adopt later on when I got, when I started producing music myself. It was a formula that I didn't think was very fresh. Let me put it that way.
Okay. Was it like lush?
Not so lush, but sort of stock.
Oh, I see. Okay. So he was writing for the masses essentially, or producing for the masses, I should say.
Yeah, they were in truth, and this is the music business as long as we've known it. There's a lot of stuff that gets recorded, to meet the expectations, more the shareholders now than in 1972. But even then, it was a business, and, we're not, it's not art over commerce here. It's commerce first and then art.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough that I've been able to keep a roof over my head with varying degrees of commerce and art.
Yeah. You haven't had to sell yourself short, essentially.
I've sold myself short before, but that was on me. It wasn't on somebody else.
Meaning, like, in other words, you didn't live up to your own expectations. Is that what you're saying?
I made a couple of records in the 90s that were strictly aimed at trying to recapture something I did in the late 80s so that the record company could make money. And it didn't work for me in any way, shape, or form. And it was a low point in my career. But you know what? I learned a valuable lesson from it. It's good that it happened. It was a valuable lesson because I found my way of fulfilling what I think my potential is. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 something years,
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the best lessons.
Sure.
Yeah. So getting back to it. So, okay. So the Emmylou Harris connection. Now, she recorded one of your songs and then wanted to meet you and then got you into the band. Was it that simple, or was it, is there a backstory behind that?
Well, of course, there's always a backstory, Well, it's Anne Murray. Her band, she had a band leader named Skip Beckwith. God bless him. I don't know if you ever came across Skip Beckwith
No. I know the name only.
Skip Beckwith, you know, he was from Halifax, but he was Ann's band leader in the early 70s. He came through Nashville looking for a guitar player who happened to be a friend of mine, to recruit Lenny Bro.
Lenny Bro?
Lenny Bro.
There's a Lenny Bro angle in this?
Well, Lenny Bro had reached the end of his rope with Ann and the band, and Skip came to Nashville looking for a particular guitar player who happened to be a friend of mine.
Ah.
And they met at my little crib that I had at the time, and Skip, being this great personality, he said, "So you write songs, do you?" And he said, "You got any I could take back to Toronto?" And I said, I handed him a tape that he was taking to Ann, but Brian Ahern was Ann's producer, who had just been hired to produce Emmylou.
Ah, perfect.
And so the tape wound up in the Emmylou pile instead of the Anne Murray pile. And according to Emmy, she listened to a bunch of songs, and mine was the last one they got to. And there were 3 or 4 songs on there that she wanted to record. And she sent out they found me somehow down in Texas, because I really did leave Tennessee after I got fired and had a couple of songs recorded. But I went up to Toronto and spent the autumn of '74 in Toronto, and went down to DC with Brian Ahern, and that's where I met Emmylou. Now here's something in the story that wouldn't happen today. Is I went back to Austin. That's where I was going to live. I decided I was going to live forever in Austin. So Emmy had a band called the Angel Band, and she was on her way to Los Angeles, and she stopped in Austin to perform at Armadillo World headquarters. And she had my number, so she called me. She said, "Hey, she had already recorded a couple of my songs." She said, "Come on out, and sing. Let's sing with me." And I said, "Okay." So I went and sat in and sang a couple of songs during her show with her. And when it was over, here's the story. She said, "Hey, I'm going to LA tomorrow, and I've got a spare ticket. You want to go?" So I said, "Yeah, I want to go." And so I don't remember who the spare ticket belonged to, but I flew first class to Los Angeles the next day with Emmy on somebody else's ticket, and stayed for 7 years. And in a couple of months, she was putting together a band called the Hot Band, and unbeknownst to me, I was her first recruit.
Oh, you were I didn't realize that. I thought you were added to the band.
No, I was for a while. The Hot Band was just me and Emmy.
Wow.
Sitting on the floor singing duets.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. So it wouldn't happen today because I couldn't fly to LA with somebody on somebody else's ticket.
Right. Yeah, very true. Remember the good old days when you could actually see somebody off at the gate?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
That's how I got in the Hot Band.
Wow. So I want to delve into something. I hope it's not too precious on you, but I know that you ended up with a bout of global amnesia.
Transient global amnesia. Indeed, I did.
But I think it's okay to talk about, because you actually wrote a song about it.
Sure.
But so can you explain what that is and what actually happened?
Sure. It was October 9th, 2020. Where I live, I have hiking trails around where I live, up and down hills and what have you. And most of the exercise I get is hiking these hills. They're pretty steep. And so I went out one morning, I came back, and I was getting ready with Joe Robinson, who you mentioned earlier, and a couple of my Aussie guitar buddies. Jed Hughes and Joe Robinson were coming over, and we were going to arrange a song to record the very next day. Well, I was making a cup of tea to get ready to go to work, and that's the last thing I remember for 6 hours. But the 9th time I asked my wife, Claudia, if I had walked the loop that morning, which is what we call hiking the trails around the house. She thought I was having a stroke. So she got me in the car and took me to the emergency room nearby. And she thought I was having a stroke because I just kept asking her over and over and over and over again. I looked at my phone. She told me I looked at my phone and I said, "Who's Jed and Joe?" Because there were texts coming from them. And she said, "Oh, those are your musician friends and that you're getting ready for a recording session tomorrow." And I said, "I make records?"
Wow.
And she told me this story, so I don't remember that. But I woke up in an MRI, and here's the thing, transient global amnesia. There's a hospital in Williamson County, Tennessee, near where I live. Pretty good size hospital with an emergency room. They get 2 cases a month. Transient global amnesia. On average, they get 2 cases a month. And 98% of the time, it never happens again. But it happened to me. So when they diagnosed, they said, "This is transient global amnesia. He's going to be all right. But we're going to keep him overnight." So I said, "Claudia, I can't eat this hospital food. So will you go get me something good to eat? And if you don't mind, go by the house and get my notebook. Because my brain is scrambled in a way that I don't even recognize it. Something good can happen from this." And so, as it was, I had my notebook, and the next morning, the first thing that happened when I woke up, my youngest daughter, sent me a photograph via text message of a sunflower going on a raft in the Thames River in the mid-1950s. Just a black and white photograph on a cell phone. Boy, that was the opening door, a sunflower growing on a narrow raft in a fog bank on the Thames.
Wow.
And from then I wrote verses and verses and verses. By the time they released me from the hospital, I had all the verses, and I came home, found the guitar, and found the right melody, the right chord changes and structure, got it together, and then recorded it the next day. So it was a 3-day affair, and it was a joyful occasion. It scared me, deeply when I came to this, like, wow, I had no idea where I was. But look at this song that I got. This is cool. And it's not often that you can record a song while you're still in the trance state that you were in when you wrote it. And I was still 3 days after it happened, I was still in that trance state. So the recording I made of it is one of the most pure recordings I've ever made in terms of actually recording the composition in the tone and vibe that it came to me in.
This trance state you speak about, it's like it was just you coming back to yourself from where you were.
Wow, it was like somebody slipped me some powerful LSD.
Wow.
And I got to be in that head state without having to endure that
Yeah.
long, dark night of the soul.
Right. So getting back to, once again, okay, so are you lyrics first, melody first, or does it switch back and forth?
It's all of the above.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, melodies come, chord changes, tones, a voicing in a chord can trigger a song. Sometimes it's, this morning I was walking the loop and listening to Nico Case.
Right.
And the sound of a few words that she put together made me think of these other words that might be the start of a song. So it comes, I don't have to tell you, it comes from everywhere.
Yeah. Are you going to slip lazy lyric in there somehow?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Once again, relating back to Paul McCartney, I didn't realize this because I I was actually kind of floored by it, that All My Lovin' was actually a piece of poetry that he put to music. I always assumed the song came first and the birds filled in the blank, but that was actually a letter he wrote to his girlfriend in the form of a poem, and then he put music to it.
Yeah, well, I can imagine, I could imagine being 21, 22 and, boogieing off to Hamburg or something and wanting to make sure you mark your territory for when you get back.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, this is, it'll take out a little insurance on this situation. It's a good way to do it.
So you were married to Roseanne Cash. What was your relationship with Johnny? Was he a good guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you guys got along well. Well, you actually did some work with him.
Yeah, quite a bit. And
I Walk the Line Revisited. Yeah. I remember Randy Bachman says, I Walk the Line is the best love song in the world because it never says the word love in it once.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also that particular reason I wrote that song was because, I heard it for the first time when I was about 6 years old. And it was pretty much like transient global amnesia for me. It just, I could not put my finger on the prototype of where that particular piece of music came from. Somehow intuitively around age 6, I understood that this is not normal. And that piece of music, when you think about the way that's composed.
Oh, the key changes.
Yeah. Modulating down in the beginning of a song.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. And it wasn't from this paradigm. It was from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I always, and I wrote the verses to that song, just recreating that morning when I heard it first coming out of a dashboard radio of a 1949 Ford. But when I couldn't come up with a good chorus, but I had a melody for the chorus. And one day it dawned on me that his words would work in my melody. And I stuck them in there and then called him and said, hey, I need for you to help me record this. So he came to the studio thinking that he was going to sing some version of I Walk the Line that he'd been singing for 35, 40 years, And then I started teaching him a new melody with his words. He kind of got a little testy with me there and said, son, you got a lot of nerve. and I, it was the first time it dawned on me that I actually did have a lot of nerve, just, hijacking his lyric and putting it in my song. But then he went out in the studio and sang the out of it, and it was beautiful.
Right. Well, the Trent Reznor thing with Hurt with him, that was such an iconic moment in music.
Yeah, it was
unbelievable.
I would say that moment was the same as the first time I heard I Walk the Line. It's like, this is beyond what we can point to as a starting place. This is just this is a visitation from another planet that's just landed on our planet, and we can listen to it, but we can't know how it got here or what it is.
Yeah. Bookends, and then somewhere in the middle is the Man in Black. It's that whole persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he always seemed like a wonderful person, and been through the ringer, as everybody knows. Everybody's watched that the Johnny Cash story or heard of the Johnny Cash story at the very least. He definitely had lived a hard life. But
yes, he did.
But he certainly seemed like just a wonderful person when you hear him in interviews and stuff.
He was a cool cat, and he was away from the larger than life persona that he so easily and gracefully projected. He was a prankster. He was a kid. What people don't know, he's Mount Rushmore, but I was lucky, and him being the grandfather of my kids, I'd watch him get down on his hands and knees and make funny noises and play with his grandchildren. It's like, that's not the guy on Mount Rushmore. That's some dude from Arkansas.
Right. Right. That's remarkable, and what a love story, you know. So God, just unbelievable that marriage and that relationship was just something else. And didn't they die within a very short time of each other?
Pretty close.
Yeah,
June went first,
yeah,
which made, if you knew John and June the way it worked, it was. I mean, I actually I said to Carlene, June's daughter, Carlene Carter, we were talking about it, and I said, well, June had to go first, because she had to be there when John gets there, because she ran the show.
right. Yeah, I got that that idea from things that I've read and watched. Of course, you never know how much embellishment there is on movies, but when you read, you usually get a better perception of things.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, it's a movie,
Yeah, exactly.
They got some things right and they got some things really wrong. So, but what you're going to do? It's a movie.
Yeah.
So,
So what are you working on now? I mean, by the way, I have to thank you for this interview because I was looking at your tour schedule. You got a fair amount of dates coming up pretty quick.
I do, yeah.
And I'm really lucky to have you at this point.
Yeah, this is about the only day you could have me. I'm working on a coffee table book of my lyrics, about 150 songs, with some prose that I wrote, some backstory. I wrote the story of Townsend, my girlfriend, and Cherry Reid, and other stories. It's kind of backstories with some of the songs, and that'll be out in the fall.
That's good for us. We'll be able to put a link into this podcast. We can put a link into the podcast for you.
Yeah, the book is called Word for Word, Rodney Crowell lyrics. And so I've been working on that. There's art and photography and all kind of stuff. And tomorrow I'm working, one of my Aussie friends I'm producing some tracks on him, and Jed Hughes, who was the Emmylou Harris and Rodney Crowell lead guitar player from the band that we had in 2015, 16, 17 there.
Okay.
And otherwise, trying to help there's some people that I'm helping develop their own thing in this world where there's no artist development. Record companies, we can't write a check to help somebody along, but I can help them try to get their song strong enough that they get a shot at it.
There you are. That's your giving back to Warner Brothers right there.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
and,
very good.
And I enjoy that. It makes me, I feel good about helping somebody along because I had a lot of help.
Yeah, mentoring is always a great thing. For one thing, with mentoring, you always end up learning more yourself anyway.
True. That's very true.
I mean, whenever I show somebody something on the guitar, I become better. It's a weird thing because it goes back to the basics. I don't know how that works, but I definitely always learn something more than they have, it seems.
It kind of goes with that Sting lyric, if you love somebody, set them free.
Yeah.
It's the gift of giving.
Yeah. There's another great lyricist, that boy. Holy smokes.
Sure.
I mean, and that song Russians that just has made a resurgence with what's going on now, and it's just, that was done during the Cold War. And yet here we are,
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Here we are. Here we are.
But anyway, what an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. It's been fantastic. I know you have to run. You're so busy. I'm glad you're able to scrape this time together for us.
Yeah. Well, happy to do so, and thank you for reaching out,
Well, thank you for everything you've done. I mean, what you did for Corolla, sending her that email, after losing her husband, and an email coming from you with regards to Chris and your old guitar, that meant the world. That was a wonderful, wonderful thing you did.
Well, I was really happy that information found me. I was sad to hear that the gentleman had passed on, but it was really great to know that the guitar found somebody that loved it.
Yeah. Well, it's back in Dave Reimer's hands now. Dave was the guy who actually sort of orchestrated the deal of Chris getting that guitar. So I guess when Chris passed away, I think Dave inherited the guitar. So it's in good hands.
You just tell Dave that at one point, chickens lived inside that guitar.
I will. And he'll get a blast out of that because he's got a great sense of humor. So fantastic, Rodney. Thank you very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
Take care.
Stay well.
You too.
Thanks for joining us. Check out our many other episodes and vignettes for more great content. And please like, share, and subscribe, and become a member at socialenergypresents.com to access all our content and earn valuable energy points just for watching.